All right, let's go.
Welcome back to the Trusted Visions Weekly Podcast. This month's topic, we are covering past, present, and future. Last week, we talked about small to mid-sized broker-dealers and how they can make it through the environment with costs being cut, regulatory costs, staying relevant with technology. And so this week, we wanted to talk about the regulatory involvement and both past, present, and future of how that's impacting all broker-dealers across the spectrum. We've seen this throughout our careers. Regulations comes in and talks about DOL, and then they start with Reg BI, and now there's other legislation that's coming through that can dramatically impact the broker-dealer you're with. And so we wanted to talk about this, and I'm going to kick it off with Shaun to talk about the past side of it. And we all remember DOL and how that impacted not only the broker-dealers, but throughout our careers, we had a lot of advisors that said, I'm not moving anywhere until I see what's happening and how broker-dealers are going to implement the processes, policies, and procedures with DOL. So, Shaun, if you want to kick off with this one of DOL and the impact it had on broker-dealers, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Well, good morning, team, and thanks for having me this morning on another podcast. But if you were affiliated in our industry, 2015, 2016-ish, you probably remember exactly where you were when the DOL Fiduciary Rules started to roll down the pipeline. The ruling itself just really shook up our industry. And it wasn't necessarily because of the rule itself. I do believe if you're in our industry, you should always have your client's best interest first. It was the implementation of the compliance complexities of a Department of Labor ruling that really caused a stir. I can remember the firm I was affiliated with is considered a large size firm. I mean, we administer calls and meetings on a weekly basis to discuss what this meant for our industry. And it meant big spending. The firm I was affiliated with was projecting minimum $10 million in spending just to keep up with the regulations. Firms were estimating this amount of money in spending because you had so many things to administer to make sure that you followed this Department of Labor ruling. Technology upgrades was a big one. Operational changes was huge. And also basic manpower. You know, at the time, at the firm I was affiliated with, they were speculating that they may have to double the size of the compliance department just to make sure that all the advisors were doing the things that were necessary to stay afloat with this rule. However, in 2016, a new administration came in, and I wouldn't say they eliminated the ruling, but certainly weakened the rules. However, changes were made and money was already spent. Yeah, we're talking about levelized compensation, across the board in some cases with some firms. Technology enhancements were made. The development of new products, such as low-cost mutual funds, was developed. However, I will say that many of the larger broker-dealers were proactive and spent the millions. You had some of the smaller firms who were in wait-and-see mode. When I was prospecting and making calls, to the smaller firms, because that was where, naturally you would go, because you understand that they may not have the millions to foot this bill. And many of those, key executives there were more on the baseline of, I'll wait until the Department of Labor tells me to spend money before I spend money. Not sure if that was the most practical approach, and they were lucky that these changes were not implemented. However, the larger firms did really get involved and were really proactive and spent millions. So with, getting back to, I guess, in today's climate, we do have Reg BI. Now, do I think the industry could be facing a similar situation? Perhaps, but maybe just on a smaller scale. So with that, Jeremy, as far as Reg BI, I wanted to get, your opinion on how you believe that, or how you see that, as far as our industry is today. Do you believe it will be the same as DOL, or maybe just a slighter, impact?
Yeah, and that's a great point about DOL. And when you look at the regulatory environment, before we get into Reg BI, you have, as a financial advisor or even a broker-dealer owner, where you not only have the regulatory body being FINRA and the SEC, now you've got Congress coming in. Now you've got the Department of Labor coming in and trying to throw in regulations. And it's just a lot to keep up with. So to your point, Shaun, with Reg BI, I don't think it's as impactful to advisors, negatively impactful to advisors and or broker dealers, but it certainly, is something that they have to be concerned about, because as we all know from a regulatory standpoint, they put out these policies or these regulations, and it's never black and white. It's a gray area where we see this all the time with broker dealers, where they allow something that another broker dealer doesn't, and it's just their interpretation of that ruling or regulation. And so, as you mentioned, Shaun, with advisors, OSJs, or enterprises should always act in their best interest of their clients. However, we always know there's a few bad apples that don't. And so, it's with Reg BI, broker dealers have to be understanding and cognizant of, hey, are we getting a bigger marketing override from this product company than this product company? And what are the regulators going to look at with that? Some broker dealers haven't even levelized comp on those variable products.
Absolutely.
And I always say, especially with the small broker dealers, it's not a matter of if, it's just when, because you're flying under the radar because the regulators are more focused on those large size broker dealers like the one you were with, but it's going to catch up to you. And I think regulation, I don't want to take it out of context that regulation is bad. I think regulation is needed and needs to continue to be needed. But I think there's too many broker dealers out there that aren't focused necessarily on the regulation because they're flying under the radar, that it's not going to get any better for them. And so Reg BI, while DOL was extremely impactful in a negative fashion in terms of the spending, I think Reg BI is much needed. It's just, how do the broker dealers adjust to the regulation, and how do they interpret it, more importantly? And so as an advisor, my advice to you from a consulting standpoint would be, if your broker dealer hasn't levelized comp on certain products, if they've started not paying you commissions on products because they don't have enough with that fund company, you got to start to question that. Because with large broker dealers, if they get a regulatory fine, they can typically withstand it unless it's that substantial. If you're a small broker dealer and you get a fine of 10, 15, 20 million, you're likely going out of business. I mean, in 2009, we've seen a broker dealer that got hit with a bunch of regulatory events, and they just shut the doors without any advance notice of their broker or of their advisors. And the advisors were left scrambling of, I don't even know if I'm getting paid. So that's my thought. I think Reg BI is much needed. I think it's just a matter of how those broker dealers interpret it. So with that, David, I'm going to pitch it over to you to talk about, since this is titled Past, Present, and Future, there's a lot of things, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, there's a lot of things that they're looking at even currently going into the future that would have an even more stronger impact on advisors than DOL and Reg BI. So with that, David, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeremy. And Shaun, it's crazy. I think the Proact is kind of one of those deals that's what I focused most of my time on. The Proact, I think, is kind of one of those things that kind of took everybody a little bit by storm. California put their laws into place on their side of it, affected a lot of the way their unionization was going to take place, and pretty much almost killed the entrepreneur out there when it came to California. And now, with Congress passing it, and it's going to the Senate without, the biggest thing, especially when California passed it, they had a carve out.
Hey, David, can you talk a little bit about just high level, because I've talked to several advisors that don't even know what Proact is. So just high level, what Proact is.
Oh, absolutely. The Proact, when you're looking at it, it's basically going to take any independent, especially in our world, and that's where we're focused on right now, is the financial advisor world. If you're an independent financial advisor, you will now become an employee of your broker dealer. And that's going to be a huge undertaking. It's talk about turning our industry upside down.
Right.
It's going to take a tremendous amount of flexibility away from you as the advisor in your practice. And now you're actually going to become an employee of that institution. You're basically your broker dealer. And, some of the biggest issues with that is if the Senate, if we're not able to lobby the Senate to get that carve out for financial advisors, now we're going to have independent financial advisors that are going to become employees of institutions. And as you said earlier, Jeremy, you're looking at your small, your regional broker dealers out there. They're not going to be able to withstand that financially, of being able to bring every single one of their independent advisors on board as an employee. You're talking benefit payments, 401ks, if they've got pensions. We don't see many of those anymore. That's going to be detrimental, not only for the broker dealer itself, but for every single advisor that's associated with that BD. They're just not going to be able to survive. There's no way they're going to be able to really holistically be able to bring every single independent advisor as an employee. And that's just, you think about that for just a second, and it's you think, well, DOL was just a pimple on the face of our industry. This could be huge. This could be this could be an entire facelift of our industry when it comes down to it. And when you look at the challenges that go along with it, you even look at the larger broker dealers out there. Yeah, they're going to be able to withstand it. If you're with a larger broker dealer today, they're going to have the capability to be able to bring those people in as employees. But then that's also going to affect not only home office staff and what their benefits are, and what are the benefits going to look like when it comes to independent advisors, because that's part of the deal. If you come over as an employee, you garner all the benefits that you get as an employee of that institution.
Right.
So us, even as independent third-party recruiters, it's going to affect our business, every single advisor out there. And really, there's a lot of unanswered questions on what that's really going to look like. And really, it's the cost. We all been in this industry for a long time. You look at balancing the cost and what it takes to make a move to another broker dealer, and balancing what your payouts are, what you're paying on advisory, what you're paying for services and products and programs and things like that. That's going to be a huge undertaking for these broker dealers. So, my thoughts are you're looking at really two options. If they want to allow their advisors to kind of quasi be independents, but be an employee, payouts are going to change. There's going to be no such thing as a very large payout. You're going to be, nobody knows what that number is going to be, but I'm assuming you're probably going to be closer to the 40, 50, maybe 60% payouts. And as far as the independents go, that's just crazy. And nobody's used to that.
Right.
So, because you look at these broker dealers, a lot of it, even the large ones, are on thin margins. So there's no way they're going to be able to basically backpack that cost themselves and bring you on as an employee to make that happen. Then the other option is, how does that get passed on? Well, what's going to happen is the broker dealers are going to look at their overall business. Where does their profitability come from? And what do you think what's going to happen on that side? You're going to start losing the programs. You're going to start losing the independence. You're going to start losing anything that's not what you would perceive as the top profitable option for that broker dealer is going to go away. So what does that look like? What will that kind of look like? I kind of say, hey, everything's going to kind of turn into a wirehouse. These are our programs. These are our services. This is our menu. You're going to go to a restaurant with a menu of 4 or 5 items, not have the flexibility of being an independent financial advisor that can basically focus their practice any which way they see fit, whether that's on the advisory side, working as a third-party RIA, you name it. There's all those options are going to be in question going forward. So how do you balance that? It's like, it would be a huge hit the wall, draw a line in the sand, and try to figure out what direction you're going to go and what it's going to look like going forward. And it's detrimental across the board. Everybody is assuming at some point that we're going to have far less and less broker dealers, which is currently happening in our industry. But I don't think anybody can foresee that we're going to end up with 4 or 5. But if this comes to fruition, it may be not far off.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, well, the Proact, everything I've read, it's likely not going to get through the Senate, but that doesn't mean it dies there, because as you put it, Shaun, new administration comes into government and they reinvigorate and reignite some of these policies, and it's not a matter of if, it's just when. And so I guess, Shaun, one question for you would be, having been with small and large firms, is how how important is it for advisors to ask those broker dealers when they're doing their due diligence on how they're adapting or what their policies are on the new regulations? Because what I found is a lot of advisors don't even keep up with the regulations. They just count on their broker dealer to. So how important is it when working with advisors to talk through, hey, this broker dealer, this is how they're adapting to those regulations?
Right. It's extremely important because these regulations, while they may not be in the forefront of your daily activities, they impact your practice. And as you mentioned, Jeremy, earlier, if you don't understand your broker dealer's, policies or how they're going to, adjust or how they're going to calculate expenses toward these regulations, and then something happens, the doors could be shut. So you certainly want to make sure that your broker dealer is in front of it. I think that's the big thing. When you're speaking with whoever your key contact is at your firm, just make sure they're in front of it. Make sure they're working on it. Make sure they have policies in place from the broker dealer level to address these legislative changes. And, you want to make sure that they have the financial resources, to accommodate these changes. So I believe it's critical, to an advisor's sustainability in the industry, because your broker dealer decisions, whether you think about that or not, the decision your broker dealer makes really impacts your livelihood on a daily basis. I mean, I consider advisors' practice, their livelihood with their relationships with their clients. So it's essential that you understand the position of your broker dealer in terms of these legislations and how they, tackle these on a daily basis. I mean, you should, your compliance department should be ahead of it. And if you're at a firm that the compliance department is not even talking about it, then you may want to explore your options.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where firms like Trusted Visions come into play. Is most advisors think payouts and pricing and technology, enhancements in technology, and don't think to dive into it and get into the weeds on that regulatory side of it. And a perfect example of that is, there's a few firms out there that are telling advisors, hey, if we don't have X number of assets with this product company, you can sell the product, but we're not paying you commissions.
Right.
Well, to me, and I would love if you guys disagree, your feedback is, to me, the siren should go off, because what that's telling me is that broker dealer, they're keeping the commissions. They're not sending it back to the fund company. They're also getting the marketing override from that fund company. It's, to me, that's a direct violation of Reg BI. Now, I'm no regulator by any means, but it makes no sense to me. And, to your point, David, where interest rates are down and broker dealers work on thin margins, they're doing everything they can to make up those margins. And so how do they do that? It's either reduction in payout, increase in cost, or some of these other things like keeping commissions if they don't have enough with that fund company. So anything to add, David or Shaun, before we wrap up this?
Oh, great call, guys. Yeah, great call.
Well, thank you for watching this week's podcast of Past, Present, and Future. We will continue down this topic for the rest of the month. We look forward to any comments you have on our LinkedIn page. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@trustedvisions.com.